Terrific Thursday to each of you. Welcome to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. It's Trade Talk Thursdays. When it comes to the Memphis Grizzlies, how big of a priority in general is a trade itself? And when it comes to specific trades, what type of trade may be the priority for the Grizzlies front office? That, plus previewing the game tonight against the Detroit Pistons and much more here on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Let's get it going.
Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
A very happy Thursday to every one of you. Hope wherever you are, wherever you're listening and wherever you are watching, you are having a wonderful start to your day. Obviously, you can find the show at Locked On Grizz and myself at Stats SAC. The show right here on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button below. Lets us know you enjoy the show. Lets others find the show. Lets the show be the best experience it can be for everybody. Make sure you also check out the show where podcasts are available. Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, the Odyssey app, free on all platforms. My name's Shawn Coleman. Credentialed media member with the Grizzlies, have been hosting Locked On Grizzlies now, riding over for the Grizzly Bear Blues, covering the Grizzlies for over 4 years, and your host here at Locked On Grizzlies. Can't thank you enough for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day. But as we're going to discuss, so many different discussions around the NBA going on right now, different stuff when it comes to COVID protocols, when it comes to teams' performances, trade deadline now officially 5 weeks away. So plenty of stuff to talk about. Check out the Locked On NBA podcast for the latest on all things NBA, free on all platforms and here on YouTube as well. So as I mentioned, it's January 6th. And so we are officially 5 weeks away. That's right. 5 Thursdays from now will be the 2022 NBA trade deadline, February 10th. And the Grizzlies, being with where they are certainly going to be a team that is a sensible team to be involved in some of these trade conversations. And I do think that without a shadow of a doubt, before I get into any details about how big of a priority a trade in general is, there is a difference in how the Grizzlies should operate this year compared to last year. You heard myself and many other media members talk about that. When the calendar hit 2022, the rebuild was done. The rebuild's done. It's over. It's taken care of. It was highly successful. It is complete. The Grizzlies are a sustainable winner now. They are, I don't want to call them a fringe contender, but they are a winner. They are a successful basketball franchise who is well on their way to back-to-back playoff seasons. They also are one of the most impressive young teams in the NBA with one of the best front office and coaching staff relationships, while also having some of the best assets in terms of potential trades and to grow moving forward. There's a lot to like about the Memphis Grizzlies compared to the rest of the NBA, not just this season, but in my opinion, even more importantly, going into the future. So the Grizzlies, the first thing to know about them right now is they are operating as a buyer. In any Grizzlies roster addition, trade speculation, free agent signing, draft pick, whatever it may be, from this point on, yes, you want to keep the present and future in mind, but it's not like it was in the past where you're trying to build this team up, where you're trying to do moves that are solely focused on the future. That's done. Moves now, in my opinion, should be done with the now and the future in place. And the reason why is because how successful this season has been. Coming into this season, 3 questions that I had personally when it came to the Grizzlies. Where would Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Taylor Jenkins be in terms of forming the 3 biggest pillars of the Grizzlies' future? Where would the Grizzlies' core be moving forward in terms of the Grizzlies' future? And could the Grizzlies show, as a result of the first 2 questions, that they would go from being a rebuilding team to a sustainable winner? Or were they going to remain a rebuilding team? Well, to make a long story short, the resounding answer to all 3 of these questions is hell yeah. Yes, all 3 of these questions have been answered with a resounding yes. Ja Morant's an all-NBA type talent this season. Jaren Jackson Jr. has shown that he could be a consistent difference maker, at least on one side of the court when it comes to defense. And Taylor Jenkins, coming off his second Coach of the Year award or Coach of the Month award in his career, one of just a few coaches who have won multiple Coach of the Month awards over the past calendar year, I'd say you could say he's a top 10 coach in the league. So absolutely, to answer those first questions, when it comes to Ja, Jaren, and Jenkins, hey, make that a law firm. Make it a country song, if you would. Ja, Jaren, Jenkins, a hell of a country song. Point is, yes, those three important pieces of the future are clearly not only here to stay, but are better than we expected them to be. Now, the second question, this is the exciting one. What would the core, how would a core come together for the Grizzlies? You know you had Ja. He's your face of the franchise. You were hoping you'd have Jaren as the second cornerstone. And yes, while his offense has been a bit inconsistent, yes, he's that second cornerstone. But it gets even more exciting. The long-term backcourt mate for Ja, you were hoping to figure that out between Bane and DeAnthony Melton this season with Grayson Allen being gone. And what's DeAnthony Melton done? Stepped up to potentially become a most improved player, and already is, what Desmond Bane has become is potentially a most improved player and clearly one of the best shooters in the league. That's exciting and a perfect compliment to Ja Morant. Again, the best teams in the West, the best team in the East, they are fueled by some of the best backcourts in the NBA, and the Grizzlies having one of the best backcourts in the NBA this year between Ja and Bane is a reason why they're fourth in the West. So that's exciting. Be thrilled. It's exciting. And then you've got Dillon Brooks, who, yes, coming off his playoff performance to support Ja, coming in, though he's only played half the season in terms of games so far, he's an anchor for the defense. And through Dillon Brooks showing his sustainable ability as a two-way impact player, Desmond's ability to develop into the talent that he is, think about it. You've got your core four of Ja, Desmond, Jaren, and Dillon. I would rank them in terms of importance: Ja, Jaren, Desmond, and Dillon. But break it down even further. You've got Ja and Desmond as the source of your offense, as the main basis of your offense, that on any given night puts you in a very good position to have a great start to your offensive production. But then look at it with Dillon and Jaren. Dillon from a perimeter standpoint and guarding the other team's best perimeter talent, and Jaren down low, you've got one hell of a defensive duo as well. I would say that if you took Dillon, Ja, Desmond, and Jaren, you took that core four and you stacked it up against the other core fours of all the NBA teams in the league right now, moving forward, Ja, Desmond, Dillon, and Jaren possibly would be in the top 5 conversation of core forwards around the league moving forward. But not even all, very few of those other core fours are as balanced with a duo to lead an offense like the backcourt combination of Jaren and Desmond Bane, who are 22 and 23, by the way, leading the Grizzlies moving forward, and the defensive duo of Dillon and Jaren are. You've got, not only do you have a clear defined core four that are all 26 and under, by the way, but you've got a balanced core four, 2 to lead the offense, 2 to lead the defense, and it's absolutely exciting. And then, so you've answered all 3 of those questions. Because of those questions being a resounding yes, the third question is a resounding yes. Yes, the Grizzlies are now a sustainable winner. They've transformed from a rebuilding team to a sustainable winner in a month's time over the past 6 weeks. And while you don't want to put too much on that success in 6 weeks, think about a few other quick points. Beyond those 4 players, think about Steven Adams, Tyus Jones, Brandon Clark. The best case scenario for all 3 of those players as a supporting trio has happened. Steven Adams is having a bounce back year. Brandon Clark looks like his rookie self. Tyus Jones is having a career best offensive year. DeAnthony Melton and Kyle Anderson, they may have fallen off offensively a bit, but they've shown that they absolutely can be a great duo off the bench along with Tyus and Brandon Clark. And now think of this. Again, you may not want to put too much emphasis on a 6-week stretch. You may think that's too small of a sample size, and that's fine. But you also got to consider that right now a 9-man rotation of a fully healthy Grizzlies roster is Ja, Desmond, Dillon, Jaren, Steven Adams is your starting 5 with Tyus, Brandon Clark, Kyle Anderson, and DeAnthony Melton. That's not the best 9-man rotation in the NBA, but I would argue it's one of the deepest. The point is that group of 9 as a rotation has played together less than 20% of the games this year. Ja, Desmond, Dillon, and Jaren have only played together in 7 games this year. I'm not saying we don't know who the Grizzlies are. We clearly know who they are. A top 10 defense when they're fully healthy, along with having one of the best backcourts in the NBA. And that combination makes them one of the better teams in the NBA. But the true ceiling of this Grizzlies team, I feel, is still kind of unknown because you haven't seen them play with their best players together over a significant stretch. So the fact that the Grizzlies are where they are with the success that they've had, but the fact that they've done it without having their best players together, except for just a few games this year, means that there still is another level to this Grizzlies team. And for all of these reasons, I feel like that in terms of making a trade, you probably don't have as much of an urgency, or you probably don't have as big of a priority as other teams have. And the reason why is because with what you've bet on so far, with what you've let happen with the roster you already had, it's been successful with flying colors. That's the reason why, in the general sense of a trade, it may not necessarily be the needed move. It would be perfectly fine, I feel, for the Grizzlies front office just to let this team ride its wave of success and see how far it can get. But however, there are plenty of sensible different scenarios that could happen that could make a trade work out. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But of course, you know the Grizzlies, they're successful. They're a buyer. They're going to be shopping around and seeing what could be out there when it comes to upgrading their team. Well, have you ever heard of Shopify? Shopify gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for big businesses. So upstart, startups, and established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly stay informed. Scaling your business is a journey of endless possibilities. What I will say is this, is that when it comes to Shopify, millions of business owners use it. It powers millions of business owners from first sale to full scale. And the great thing about Shopify is that if you go to shopify.com right now, /LockedOnNBA, for a free 14-day trial, make sure Locked On NBA is all lowercase, and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Again, go to shopify.com /LockedOnNBA, all lowercase when it comes to Locked On NBA, and get a free 14-day trial right now at shopify.com. Again, can't thank you enough for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day, but the NFL season has reached its final week before the playoffs happen. Check out your favorite Locked On NFL podcast as your second listen of the day after you make Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day. So as I mentioned, every Thursday moving forward, it's going to be Trade Talk Thursday. Plenty of things to talk about. In today's episode, we're really breaking down how urgent, how sensible a Grizzlies trade truly is. Does it make sense with where this team is? And as I stated in the first part of the show, a Grizzlies trade may not necessarily be that big of a priority, because not only what the Grizzlies have right now, has it been successful beyond anybody's expectations this year, but you even haven't seen the best version of it yet, except for a few games. But that should not be what prevents the Grizzlies from shopping. This isn't like past years where you want to give the Grizzlies time to truly see what they are as a team when they are the best versions of themselves. You know what this Grizzlies team is. You know what brings them success, and you know they can consistently do it to have success. You're just thrilled that there's still another level to that success once they get their best players available to play at the same time. So in terms of an actual trade itself, it may not be that big of an urgency. It may not be that big of a priority, but what that truly means is that the Grizzlies aren't in a position like a Chicago Bulls team, for instance, who may shop a Patrick Williams to go get a Jerami Grant because they truly want to make the most of this year. They want to make the most of this short window to be able to make a playoff, to make a true title run. This isn't a situation like you see with the Sacramento Kings, who may potentially go after a Ben Simmons because they've been a franchise, an unsuccessful franchise for so long, they want to taste some type of success. Dak Kleiman stated at Media Days, yes, the Grizzlies have a sense of urgency now that they've not had in the past, but that doesn't mean that they're going to try to force trades. That doesn't mean that they're going to be overly aggressive to change things up, because at the end of the day, despite how successful the Grizzlies have been, they're not a true contender. They're not. It's the truth. I mentioned it before on this podcast. I mentioned it other places over the past few days. I feel the dream scenario for this Grizzlies team this year is to be like the Atlanta Hawks were last year. Get a few lucky breaks, and maybe you get to a very competitive second round series, or maybe even you make a Western Conference Finals run. I'm not expecting that. But I do think this team, as it is very capable of making it to the second round, but also making it a very competitive second round matchup against the Suns or Jazz or Golden State. That's the overall ceiling of this team that I feel is there. So for that reason, while Zach Kleiman says there's a sense of urgency, that doesn't mean the Grizzlies are going to go out and be overly aggressive because they feel their window is right now and they just have to take advantage of it. That's not where this team is. But what Zach Kleiman, in my opinion, meant by that sense of urgency is that where the Grizzlies are, because they've had so much success and they have every reason to just let the team be as is, especially with the fact that there's not been many games where the full roster is played together. You can have trades come to you. That is a very good position to be in. That's a very good position of leverage. Let trades come to you. Because with so many of the Grizzlies players on their rosters, not only being the second youngest roster in the NBA, but with so many of these young players playing at either a very high level or a higher than expected level, you've got a lot of attractive trade chips. You've also got expiring contracts in Kyle Anderson and Tyus Jones. I'll get to those in just a moment. But you also have draft picks in terms of the future, 3 of them in 2022. You've got a well-stocked cupboard that is very attractive to teams that may want to engage the Grizzlies as trade talks. So when there's a name out there, there's sensible targets out there for the Grizzlies this year. Jerami Grant, Harrison Barnes. I've thrown out the name Cam Reddish in a different type of move, where in that situation, you consolidate the back end of the roster and take on an intriguing, young player who you potentially could have you help out in the future. That probably is less sensible of a trade. Probably doesn't make too much sense to do that type of trade, but it could make sense for the Grizzlies. But sure, if it makes sense to take the right combination of players and picks to go get a Harrison Barnes for this year and next year, to go get a Jerami Grant for this year and next year, absolutely. Both those players would be sensible additions to this team that could take it to a next level. Again, not to a contender's level, but could make this team better and make them more competitive against a true contender in the playoffs. And I think that's a move worth making if it's the right price, and especially since you can control that type of player. But the other thing that I'll say is this, the other side of this coin is that with how the Grizzlies have played, despite not having their full assortment of best players, it makes you feel like that some people may be expendable, like a Kyle Anderson or a Tyus Jones, to go out and get future assets, to go out and get draft picks or a young, intriguing player who you could keep past next year, things such as that. Me personally, that's an attractive route to go. I feel like the Grizzlies would not necessarily lose that much if they would trade a Kyle Anderson or a Tyus Jones. I feel that they can remain very successful, and I think it would be smart if you're not going to extend either one of them to go try to get value for them in a trade at the trade deadline. I think there's logic in that, but that's my logic. That's my thinking. What matters is what this team deserves, in my opinion. And what matters to this team is how hard they've played, how well they've played, and how much they believe in each other and love playing with each other. I feel it's owed to this Grizzlies team for them to have the chance together to see what they truly can accomplish. In other words, I think that it makes more sense for the team to not trade a Kyle Anderson or a Tyus Jones. Even if you may not sit there and re-sign them, this team has earned the benefit of trusting in the roster as is and seeing how far they can go together. That matters more, I feel, for this team itself than the logic of trading away those expiring contracts for assets. I truly do feel that way. Though, again, I do think it's logical for you to shop expiring contracts to a true contender for future assets. And the Grizzlies still may do that. But I do think that either way is logical. If you allow for this team to continue to play as is and you simply see how far it can go, they've earned the right. They absolutely deserve to see that happen. But if you want to continue to be an active and, a very, very creative front office to continue to get future value for present value, I think both sides of the coin make sense. But that in the end is where it stands. In general, in my opinion, a trade itself is not that big of a priority for this team right now. It's just not. Because again, you're seeing so much success with what you already have, and you haven't even seen the best version of it yet, despite a few games this year. That, to me, is a perfect reason where if the Grizzlies want to stand pat, I've got no issue with it. But for a front office that has been active, for a front office that has been creative, yeah. If a trade comes your way, if teams are attracted to your assets and you could use a player or a player or two and a pick and get a roster upgrade like a Harrison Barnes or a Jerami Grant or a Miles Turner even, to upgrade this team now that you can control in the future, do it. But don't just do something to do it. Don't be over-aggressive and overpay because it's not going to make that big of a difference for you this year. If you want to make a roster upgrade that you feel benefits your team now and into the future by using assets that really are going to only add value now, do it all day. But the overall point that I'm making is that a trade itself is not that big of a priority. And a specific type of trade is not really a preference one over the other. Because at the end of the day, I think it's perfectly fine. I think it is perfectly logical to let this Grizzlies team as is play itself through the season to see how far they truly can go. And you'll benefit from it just like you benefited from the Grizzlies playoff experience last year. So at the end of the day, yes, a trade, if it comes our way, the Grizzlies should certainly listen. The Grizzlies should operate as a buyer that lets the market come to them. And if it doesn't, you're perfectly fine. But if it does, be urgent, act quickly, act decisively, and get a piece that can make you better. But don't just do a move just to do a move. And don't do a move just to take away from this team now to focus on the future. Do something that is truly going to either benefit your future without taking away from the team now, or do something that's going to make your team better in the present and the future. That should be the focus for Memphis. I know I'm saying a lot of general things here. We'll get more into specifics as we get closer to the trade deadline. But I think this deep of a dive into the general status of the Grizzlies and the general reasoning behind what they should do at the trade deadline, I think it's relevant. You have a wonderful product with what you already have. And again, you haven't even seen the best version of it. You owe it to that development to see what it can do on its own, to see how far it can go on what it has. But if you clearly have a way to make it better, do it all day long. But just let the market come to you. Don't do something just to do something, which just Grizzlies front office is not going to do. And don't do something over aggressive because you think you have a chance at contention this year based off what you actually have right now. This Grizzlies team is not a true contender, but they've earned every right to see what they can do as a sustainable winner and how far they can go. So when it comes to a trade, yes, we're going to have plenty of discussions. Yes, I feel the Grizzlies will be involved with those discussions moving forward. But one thing that I'll end on before we get to the preview with the Pistons, one thing that I will end on, this Grizzlies team, this front office, has been a front office that has always seemed to make moves after previous talks. So even if you may not necessarily see something happen at the trade deadline this year, talks that could happen right now, like we saw with the Mike Conley trade, talks that can happen right now could lead to something quickly happening in the summer. And it happening after another successful Grizzlies playoff run. But the key for the Grizzlies to get where they're going to get is, despite all the great wins that they've had against quality teams, they've got to make sure that they don't run into issues in games that they should clearly win. That includes tonight against the Pistons. We'll discuss that in just a moment. But before we get to that, listen, the Grizzlies right now are a lot more fun of a team to bet on than they were earlier this year. But if you enjoy betting in general, my suggestion would be that you check out betonline.ag, the fastest and easiest way for you to bet on all your favorite sports action. No matter if it's the NFL, NHL, basketball, what it may have you, NCAA, BetOnline is the best place for you to go. And if you go right now on your laptop or mobile device, check it out. You'll be able to put in the promo code Locked On and get 50% or get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Check out betonline.ag today. On tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast, we'll have plenty to talk about. Obviously, and we'll get into this in just a moment, obviously, a lot of roster shifting going on now as some players are coming out of health and safety protocols while some others are dealing with new potential injuries. We'll recap the game against the Pistons, plus look, in my opinion, at a very big weekend that awaits the Grizzlies as they head back out to LA for the second time this year. They'll take their LA tour, facing the Clippers and the Lakers on back-to-back nights. That's tomorrow on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. So let's jump into tonight, and it finally has occurred. I talked with Greg Gaston and Eli Savoy on Sports 56 yesterday, and they asked the question, when are we getting DeAnthony Melton and Dillon Brooks back? And I said, it could be any day, but it's more than likely going to be before that Western Conference road trip this weekend. And lo and behold, later on in the day, yesterday, it was revealed that both DeAnthony Melton and Dillon Brooks are questionable for tonight's game when it comes to health and safety protocols. But as we know, that typically does mean that the Grizzlies just want to make sure everything's good before the game, and then they'll likely be made available. And I think it's smart. The reason why is because before you really want to utilize both of them in important games against the Lakers and against the Lakers and the Clippers this weekend, you want to get them, get their feet under their legs a bit more. You want to get them a little bit of run against the Pistons. So I think it's smart for them to do that. On the flip side of things, another development, Kyle Anderson is out of health and safety protocols, but his back is sore. He had that earlier this year, maybe a lingering issue going on with Kyle Anderson. But the big development is that Desmond Bane also is doubtful for tonight's game. And it says quad soreness. I think personally he would play if this was a bigger game. And nothing against the Pistons. They're just not the most competitive team at the moment. But my point is that I do think it's smart for the Grizzlies to give a bit of rest to Bane, who certainly is going to be running into now this part of the season. He's gotten past 35, coming up on 40 games. It's been quite a while, even though he did it earlier this year. It's been quite a while since he's played this many games, if ever, in an NBA season. He did it last year. He's now doing it this year. Eventually, it's going to start to wear on his body a bit with how much basketball he's played without having done it before. So an opportunity to give him a night of rest, again, especially before an important weekend, makes perfect sense. So again, the big developments are John Conchar and Xavier Tillman now are the only two Grizzlies players who, with the list that had got up as high as 7 over the past 10 days, those are the only two Grizzlies players in health and safety protocols now. Dillon Brooks, DeAnthony Melton, they're questionable for tonight, but should return in some capacity. They'll probably have some type of minutes restriction. But also, you got Desmond Bane resting, and I think that's a perfectly good setup for the Grizzlies. But now, the other thing that you're running into is that you've got the opportunity for those players to get back against a Pistons team that also is missing some key players. Kelly Olynyk will be out for over 6 weeks. You've got, you've got Jerami Grant, who obviously is out as well. But the key is that this young Pistons team, listen, they're struggling. They're one of the worst teams in the league, but they're taking advantage of that by playing some of their younger players. Cade Cunningham, while he has struggled certainly shooting the ball, has had good stretches of being the all-around excellent talent that was very, very much typed, and for right reasons, as the number 1 pick in a very strong 2021 draft. You've also got Saddiq Bey, who has come back into form after what was a very strong rookie season, and other players who have stepped up as well. The thing about it is that when you look at the numbers, the Grizzlies should have every advantage tonight that you can think of. The Pistons do take care of the ball very well, and they limit offensive rebounding. So the Grizzlies' usual avenue to success, that may be a bit limited, but unlike against other opponents that the Grizzlies have recently played, this is the game where the Grizzlies should just simply play to their potential. They should just simply play good half-court defense, good half-court offense, and trust their overall talent enough to beat a team like the Pistons. But if you go back to last year, there was one of the more disappointing losses of the season was the Grizzlies against a Pistons team in Detroit where it shouldn't have lost. Go back to just a few weeks ago. The Grizzlies lost back-to-back games against the Portland Trailblazers team that's struggling this year and against the Thunder. Those losses do happen, and they have less significance when you back them up with wins over, Cleveland and Brooklyn and Phoenix. They don't have that much of an impact on you. But it does show this team is still prone to losing games it clearly should win. And even though the Grizzlies are getting back Dillon Brooks and DeAnthony Melton, without Desmond Bane, you're going to have to see another player step up, in my opinion, and deliver to support Ja to get this game won. You hope that's Jaren building off his successful game against Cleveland on offense. You hope that DeAnthony Melton and Dillon Brooks can give you some type of offensive impact. You hope that Tyus Jones and Brandon Clark can do the same. But the big key for this Grizzlies team is simply playing basketball at the level that they're able to play. No needed advantages like you would against a more competitive team or a team that's closer to contention. The Grizzlies just need to play as if they're the best talents on the court. And in this game, that's what they're going to be, with the hope that Dillon Brooks and DeAnthony Melton get some legs underneath them and are able to show good in their return to play after being off for nearly 10 days. It's going to be a fun night. Cade Cunningham, John Morant on the same court. We're going to be able to talk, all things when it comes to Detroit, who have one of the better fan bases, I feel, when it comes to coverage and general overall fan bases in the league. It's going to be a fun night. You'd love to see Jerami Grant out there. You'd love to see Desmond Bane out there. But at the end of the day, this is a game. It's a trap game. The Grizzlies simply need to play to their potential and take care of business. And you also hope that there, again, is the continuation of some good narratives. Dillon and DeAnthony showing that they're healthy. Jaren hopefully rounding into form when it comes to his offense. And the defense obviously being able to continue to play well. I think those things will happen. I think that this will be a convincing win for the Grizzlies, and one that they'll certainly need as they hopefully continue to get deeper and healthier before they take another Western Conference West Coast road trip, but their final one of the season this weekend against the Clippers and the Lakers. And we'll have all the reaction to what occurs tonight on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Hope you have a great Thursday, and we'll talk to you again soon here on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast.